Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Eric Hayes. I'm the Artistic Director of Role Players Ensemble. Welcome to this, our first presentation of an original play, Tassajara1964. I just want to quickly share with you that I grew up here in Danville. I had a 40-year relationship from childhood here. And this story fascinated me when I first learned about it, and I felt the need to create something with it. And so this is our first incarnation in front of people, and I hope you find it as meaningful as it has been for me and the cast. So I think of this evening as three parts. First part is the play. Second part, we have a little talk back discussion. We'd like to just engage with you guys a little bit. And then third is called Punch and Cookies. And so we invite you, if you want, to stay around and have Punch and Cookies with us, okay? So anyway, we'll be starting in just a moment. Thank you for being here.
6:47 a.m. Thursday, May 7th, 1964.
Oakland approach control, this is Pacific Air 773, 5,000 feet.
Pacific 773, this is Oakland approach control. Radar contact 22 miles northeast of Oakland, maintain 5,000. Your transmitter is garbled. The Oakland altimeter 290290908, time 13:48 1/4.
Roger. Do you read me now?
Still has the same, sounds like overmodulation.
Unintelligible.
Say again.
Oakland approach control, United 593, we're at 6.
United 593, roger. Traffic 12 o'clock, 5 miles southwestbound, a Pacific Fairchild. You'll be number 2 on the ILS runway 28 at San Francisco.
Thank you. We
Roger.
have the ready.
Roger. Pacific 773, turn left heading 2004 vectors to ILS 28 at San Francisco. United 593, turn left heading 160.
160 for United 593.
Pacific 773, Oakland approach control. Pacific 773, Oakland approach control. Radar contact lost. Turn right heading 270, maintain 5,000. United 593, do you still have the Pacific aircraft in sight, over?
No, where should they be?
He should be at your 2 o'clock position, 4 miles westbound.
No.
Unintelligible.
Oh, that transmission might have been them.
I believe there's something wrong.
LD McFadden, marketing rep for Pacific Airlines.
2 drinks on the house, free limousines to and from the airport, free buffet dinner, and a $15 cash refund. The package deals were put together through the cooperation of the airline and the Reno Chamber of Commerce and 2 Reno casinos, Harrah's Club and Harold's Club. In both cases, the traveler is encouraged to spend the entire night awake and alert in the casino he chooses. He can take no baggage with him and must take one of 3 early evening flights to Reno and return on one of 3 early morning flights back to San Francisco the next day.
Father Michael Weishar of San Damiano Retreat.
We got a call that morning that a plane had crashed and our presence was needed to help administer aid and comfort to the injured and perhaps read last rites to the dying. Brother Douglas and I drove out through the valley as fast as we could until we saw the place on the hill that was shrouded in smoke and dust. We stopped the car, we dashed up the hill. Before I could catch my breath, I realized that I was already standing in the middle of the burnt and mangled wreckage. There was no plane. There were no people, just pieces. pieces of what was a plane, what were people. It was too late. There was nothing we could do. Too late even for us.
44 killed in airliner crash.
A twin-engine turbojet airliner carrying 44 persons plunged into a hillside about 7 miles southeast of Danville this morning, killing all aboard. The plane, a Pacific Airline Fairchild F-27 en route from Reno to San Francisco, disintegrated upon impact, strewing wreckage for a quarter mile.
It is strangely quiet on the hillside, despite the emergency crews. What voices dare break the silence are drowned out by a wind that whips the hillside in cold gusts. A pair of priests arrive to administer last rites, but they walk away shaking their heads. A grim-faced sheriff's deputy puts it another way, saying, "There's just a lot of hamburger up there, no people." After a moment of silence, he added, "At least they felt no pain." Wallets, handbag, business cards, rings, bits of briefcases and clothing, everything is being put in one little cardboard box. All that is near and dear to 44 people fits in one little cardboard box.
I was having breakfast with my children and I heard the roar of the plane's remaining engine.
Tony Aguiar.
It was only about 100 feet up and heading away from me toward the west. It was going slow. One engine was out. I don't remember which. There was a huge explosion and then it was all over. It was one big ball of fire. Then the whole side of the hill was flying with bits of metal and everything.
David Silva. My brother Richard and I were following the car. It was just after breakfast. We saw the plane coming in low, flying in a kind of glide. The plane vanished over the top of a little hill, and at that instant, we heard this tremendous explosion, like a sonic boom. I knew everyone was being killed.
Richard C. Collins, worker at the Atomic Energy Commission Radiation Laboratory in Livermore, and his wife, Jean.
Well, I was just going outside to get the morning paper.
I've always been afraid of something like this happening. They fly so low over these hills. I've sometimes awakened at night thinking this might happen. I heard the engine whine and I looked out the kitchen window. It wasn't more than 200 feet up. I rushed out the back door and I looked up the hill just in time to see the plane hit the hill.
The plane had made it over the
There was
first.
a big explosion. I'm not sure if it was on impact or just before. Then there was a ball of fire and a small mushroom cloud.
If it had cleared the hill, it would have crashed into San Ramon Village. There are about 2,000 lucky people over there.
Gordon Rasmussen, cattle rancher.
I knew it was not an ordinary crash. Our ranch is just north on Tassajara Road and the Sound carries. I'm a member of the volunteer fire department, so I rushed to the site. Dave Silva and I were the first ones there. I remember looking at the blood on my boots and thinking the plane must have hit the herd of sheep that graze on this hill.
The population of Danville in 1964 was about 5,000 people. For the first and only time, Danville received the attention of the New York Times.
The Toledo Blade.
Chicago Tribune.
St. Louis Post-Dispatch.
Oakland Tribune.
San Francisco News Call Bulletin.
Everett Washington Herald.
Nevada State Journal.
The Oregon Journal.
Seattle
The Yakima Morning
The reporters were the worst. They circled like turkey buzzards. They would climb the telephone poles and hook into the lines to make their calls. All along Tassajara Boulevard, you would see them going up and down the poles. It was like the circus was in town. We couldn't use our own phones. The lines were so clogged up.
Among the 44 killed were a crew of 3. Captain Ernie A. Clark, 52, of San Carlos, who spent 4 years in the U.S. Army Air Corps and had flown for Pacific for 17 years, is survived by 3 teenage daughters. His wife died the year before. First Officer Ray Andrus, 31, of Santa Clara, leaves behind his wife and 4 children, and stewardess Margaret Schaefer of Belmont, who has a 12-year-old daughter and a brother in Ohio.
33 boarded in Reno. The flight stopped in Stockton, where 2 people got cut off, and 10 boarded for the continuation of the flight to San Francisco.
Mr. and Mrs. Ray Kroc of Tracy.
I don't know much about planes. It sounded all right to me. It's a smooth ride. There was a lady and her mother-in-law from SF we met on the plane. They're both very nice. As we were getting off, the stewardess told us, "You sure got a beautiful airport. First time I've seen it." I wished her luck. As we were walking away from the plane, I looked over my shoulder and the pilot was in the window. He waved to me. I waved back.
Marie Nielsen.
Here it is. Here it is. Here's my ticket for the Pacific flight that crashed. Now, I often close my shop early and I drive to San Francisco or San Jose to catch a Pacific or a Paradise flight. I gamble all night and then I fly back early the next morning and open up the shop again. I had planned to take that flight. And I asked my husband, Gene, to drive me to the airport yesterday. But he said, "Oh no, let's just drive to Reno instead." I always had bad luck at the bingo tables. But now I know. Lady Luck was with me all the time. Here's the ticket. Every time I look at it, I get the jitters.
Tom Keene, Reno businessman.
Now, I don't know whether I forgot to set my alarm or I just didn't hear it. All I know is I woke and I realized I was late. I leapt out of bed, skipped breakfast, didn't even bother to shave, threw some things in a bag and raced to the airport. So I ran to the Pacific counter and was told I had just missed the flight. I went over to the next counter and booked a flight on Bonanza Airlines. I had a couple of hours to kill, so I left the airport to take care of some business. As I was returning to the airport, I heard over the radio about the crash. This incredible wave came over me. It was like I had walked into a dark room and then came out of the world again. I feel every day I get it from now on. It's a free day.
San Francisco Examiner.
A temporary mortuary for the plane crash victims was set up yesterday in Danville's Oddfellows Hall, an old building which has a movie theater on the first floor. Representatives of at least 5 governmental agencies met in the second floor of the hall, which was converted into an autopsy room.
Oakland Tribune.
Danville. It is a warm, sunny day. People moving along the quiet streets can feel it. They drive slowly past the Oddfellows Hall and the San Ramon Valley Mortuary, adjacent buildings. They see the large aluminum-sided trucks pulled up alongside the hall. The tarpaulin stretched between the building and the truck. The giant Red Cross sign out front of the mortuary. In the hall, one room has been turned into an autopsy room and laboratory. A coffee pot perks merrily. Only coffee and years of conditioning doing this job keeps these men on their feet almost around the clock.
We don't think we can identify a single victim.
Contra Costa County Coroner, L.H. Fraisher.
Now, we are painstakingly gathering up all the remains we can find. There's just nothing to show relatives. There'd be no sense in it. It just isn't enough to identify anyone. Frankly, we don't know what to tell the families.
Vicki Shaka, former Danville librarian, current Lafayette librarian.
In 1964, I was in 3rd grade and very much a part of the sleepy little town of Danville. Now, second only to the dime store where the kids would go to get penny candy, the Village Theater was our favorite place because that's where you could see the latest Disney film. And on Saturdays, we would walk. And I remember that you only had to pay 50 or 75 cents to see a movie back then. I do remember my mother telling me about a plane crash. She told me that they were bringing bodies of the people that were killed to the Village Theater because there were too many for the mortuary, Wayland's mortuary next door to the theater, to handle all of them. And my mom actually wanted to go and drive by a few days after the crash. And what I remember so vividly was this huge Red Cross flag just hanging outside of the theater. And the memory of that big white banner with this red cross has stayed with me to this very day. All I could think about was just all the bodies inside.
Mel Whalen, San Ramon Valley Chapel.
Positively the worst I have ever seen, and anyone who's ever witnessed airline crashes agrees. Since Thursday morning, we've been working almost 50 hours straight. We have agencies coming in and out at all hours, reporters thick as molasses, cars parading by. Our family bathroom has been made into a dark room. My wife has gone over 20 pounds of coffee. This isn't the norm for Danville. Never seen anything like it.
David Whalen, Mel Whalen's son.
My dad kept the unclaimed personal effects of the passengers sealed in little plastic bags pinned to a corkboard in the garage for years. Mostly watches without the bands or sunglasses and frames without the lenses. He said that if relatives ever showed up, he'd be ready. Just the kind of guy he was.
Chuck Ferreira.
I was about to graduate from San Ramon High in May of '64. My mom had a beauty shop across from Valley Meadowlands on Harts Avenue. I know it sounds kind of macabre, but my mom used to do the hair for Mel Whalen. She said she got paid like anybody else and they never complained. Around the time of the crash, I remember she came home, she was really upset. She and my father disappeared around the corner. I knew it had to do with the crash. When they reappeared, I could tell by my father's face it was bad. I was 17 at the time, and I knew there had been a plane crash and a lot of people died, but I couldn't understand the magnitude of it. It was just kind of unreal to me. A couple of weeks later, a couple of the guys and I on a lark decided to go out to the site. It wasn't hard to find. There was a dirt road cut into the hill where all the service vehicles had gone up and down the hill. No one was around, but I remember looking over my shoulder a lot to make sure none of the ranchers would catch us. The field was empty, except for this huge hole. It was like I could see the outline of the plane, where the nose would have been, where the wings. It brought home the magnitude of what happened.
Passenger, Reverend Lon Earl Eakes.
I've seen a lot in my time, which is ironic considering I'm nearly blind now. When you get to be 88, people make allowances for you to say crazy things. And heck, what do I care? I'm 88 years old. I'm going back to my native Georgia for my class reunion. Emory University, class of 1896. I'm the oldest living alumni from that school, I'm told.
Many children's lives changed in an instant.
Marcia Taramoski, daughter of passenger Lillian Taramoski.
My mom loves music. She loves Pete Fountain, and she loves to dance. She always comes home from work and puts on one of those twirly dresses and dances around the house. When my sisters Linda and Kim and I were younger, she used to twirl us all around the house with her. She remarried about 3 years ago. Our stepdad isn't very nice to her. We can always hear him yelling from behind their door. She's gone to Reno to get a divorce, and I'm fine with it. Anita Andrus, daughter of First Officer Ray Andrus.
I was only 9.5 years old when this took place, but I have very vivid memories. I remember CBS News coming to our house to interview us. I don't remember it getting aired, but I do remember going to school and having everyone look at me. And I remember my mom sitting on the side of the bed and holding my father's picture and crying. And I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "Your father's been in an accident." And I said, "Is he dead?" And she said, "Yes." And my whole life just changed in that moment. I went to tell my sister Audrey.
Martha Andrews, wife of First Officer Ray Andrews.
The FBI was at our house. Family was there, and friends, and pilots, and their wives. It was dizzying. While all this was going on in my living room, Alice, my 4-year-old, came up to me and she leaned in close, tapped me on the arm, and said, "Now I'm like Carolyn Kennedy, aren't I, Mommy?"
June Clark, daughter of Captain Ernest Clark.
After the crash, the press started camping out in front of our house. Some days we couldn't even make it to the bus stop. We had lost our mother the year before, and the press seemed fascinated with the orphaned Clark girls.
How are you feeling today?
Does this feel the same as when you lost
You've
your
been
mother?
responsible for your father's failures.
Our Aunt Dorothy, my father's sister, had come to live with us after my mother had died. She was our shield.
If you have something to say, you say it to me.
The speculation about my father nodded. I knew my dad was sad about my mother, but he'd never do anything to hurt anybody. He wouldn't leave us.
Ernest Clark, captain of Pacific Airlines Flight 773.
Charles Lindbergh was my hero. Oh, me and a million other boys. But I couldn't let it go. Now, other heroes came and went, but I continued to look up to the skies. Now, when my hometown of Omaha had an essay contest to promote air-mindedness, well, I jumped at the chance. Now, my essay was entitled, "How to Make Omaha and Council Bluffs the Aviation Center of the United States." Now, I imagined building an airport complete with lighting for night flying, hangars for the planes, a machine shop, a weather station, and a streetcar to take carry passengers to the airfield. I won the contest. Now, later, as a teenager, I got 10 hours of flight training through the Thomas Alva Edison Scholarship Program. No, I was hooked. Could hardly think of anything else. And then when I was 17, I paid $35 for the shell of a Swallow biplane, the heap, I called it. I saved another $65 through welding to buy a new engine. Now, the engine needed as much repair as the plane itself, and it took me months, but finally the plane was completely rebuilt. I was the youngest person in Omaha to own his own plane.
Mr. Tibbetts! Federal Aviation Administration Representative Joseph Tibbetts.
Pacific Airlines is in the process of notifying the next of kin. No addresses of the victims will be released until notifications are complete, probably later this afternoon. The airline has set aside a special room at the San Francisco International Airport for relatives of the crash victims, but none has arrived as of yet.
Why is the FBI involved?
The FBI is investigating any possible violations of federal law in this unexplained disaster.
Is it true that the flight tapes have been sent to Washington for analysis?
The tape recordings have been turned over to the FBI.
Mr. Tibbetts, is it true that a gun was found at the crash site?
We have no further comments at this time.
Our family moved to Las Vegas a month before my big brother Ray's senior year in high school.
Marilyn Andress, sister of First Officer Ray Andress.
Going into a new school where friendships are well established and you're the new kid on the block is always hard. Yet, at the end of the year, Ray was voted best liked in the senior class in the yearbook. I think that was true of him in just about any group he was a part of.
Margie Schaefer, flight attendant.
I like the short trips. It gives me more time to be at home with my daughter. I'm a divorcee and I take care of her alone. She's 12 years old now and she's heading into some rough years. I want to be there for her as much as possible.
San Francisco Chronicle.
Mystery revolver found in wreckage. A revolver found in the wreckage of Pacific Flight 773. It touched off an immediate, full investigation by the FBI. Who owned the pistol and whether it played a role in the crash were unanswered mysteries. Curtis O'Lynham, agent in charge of the FBI here, declined to speculate on the significance of the gun. He would only point out that it is illegal for anyone but law enforcement officers to carry a gun on a commercial flight. The FBI later, however, did send a package by airliner to Washington, D.C., where its national crime laboratories are located. Agents refused to confirm that the package containing the revolver or any other evidence found at the crash site.
Passenger George Lecoq, San Francisco Police Inspector.
Betty and I flew up to Reno to meet our friends the Martins. We really like overnight trips. I get to blow off some steam and Betty gets a break from the kids. The airlines make it easy. I can even get back early enough to go to work the next day.
Dave DeVoe, Danville resident.
I was a PFC, that's private first class, in the U.S. Army Battle Group, 39th Infantry, stationed at Fort Lewis, Washington. I was on the post-military triathlon team. Now, the triathlon consisted of 3 events, the shooting, swimming, and running. In the summer of 1957, the team was going to the 6th Army track meet at Fort Ord, California. Military transport wasn't available, so we had to travel by Western Airline. It was a civilian carrier. We were not in uniform, and each of us had our .44 caliber pistol in his overnight bag. Now, we brought a can of ammo with us so we'd be able to practice prior to the competition. Upon showing up at the airline counter at SeaTac Airport in Washington, I asked if the ammo needed to be checked into the baggage, but was told just to carry it on and place it under the seat, which I did. In those days, there was no security check before boarding the airplane. People were just proud that they could travel so far, so fast. They didn't think someone would do something. It's amazing how things have changed over the years.
Passenger Polly Johnson, singer.
Some people call me a gospel singer, others a pop singer, some a folk singer. I don't really care. I just love to sing, I always have. Now, I'm really looking forward to our tour back east. We're going to stop on the way and perform in my home state of South Dakota. I've got a lot of friends and family there. I'm really looking forward to it.
Civil Aeronautics Board Chief Investigator Edward Slattery.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. On behalf of the Civil Aeronautics Board, the FAA, and all related agencies, our thoughts and prayers go out to the families of the victims of Pacific Airlines Flight 773. The investigation is ongoing with the full force of our nation's capital behind it. The FBI Crime Laboratory has been analyzing the recorded radio transmission between Flight 773 and Oakland Air Traffic Control. The FBI has authorized the release of a portion of its contents. The transcription reads, "My God, I've been shot. I've been shot."
The .357 Smith & Wesson Magnum revolver found at the crash site was traced back to a Frank Gonzalez, 27, of San Francisco. Gonzalez, a member of the Philippine yachting team in the 1960 Olympics, was said to have been having financial problems and was estranged from his wife. Investigation of his story found a trail of accounts from friends and family telling of a man who was talking boldly about not having much time left. One Reno casino employee reported that a man fitting Gonzalez's description had lost a lot of money the night before the crash, and when this was pointed out to him, he was quoted as saying, "Who cares? I'll be dead tomorrow."
Besides being the owner of the gun, the FBI was alerted to Gonzalez as a suspect because he had purchased $105,000 in flight insurance from an airport vending machine, more insurance than anyone else on the flights.
Forensics eventually determined that a severed right hand found at the crash site was that of Frank Gonzalez, and that this hand indeed had traces of gunpowder residue on its fingers. Had the plane gone down a few minutes later, it would have crashed into the San Francisco Bay, and neither the gun nor the hand would have ever been found.
Martha Andrus.
Family never wants the pilot to be blamed. It's hard to live down.
Julie Clark.
Thank God, was all I could think. Hallelujah. I knew it wasn't my father's fault. He wouldn't do that to all those people. It feels strange to say, but I hope he was dead before the plane crashed. I hope he didn't feel any pain.
Many relatives of passengers had a different reaction.
Goddamn bastard! own life. Why did he have to kill everyone else?
This was a man-made and not God-made.
It
It
could
seemed
never
so
have happened.
unnecessary.
Should not have happened.
Passenger Mrs. Earl Thomas.
I've been visiting my sister in Stockton. I had my baby with me on my visit. I don't go anywhere without my precious. I had my return ticket to New York on another airline, but I canceled it when they wouldn't let her on the plane without getting a rabies shot. Fortunately, Pacific Airlines said that they didn't require such a shot. I couldn't imagine putting my precious through any unnecessary pain.
Flight insurance may be purchased at airports at the rate of 2.5 cents per $1,000. Vending machines provide $20,000 worth of insurance for only 50 cents, with a limit of $150,000. But passengers can go to 3 different machines and get a total of $450,000.
San Jose News.
Dear editor, the recent tragedy with Pacific Airlines caused by a deranged individual thinking he would leave a large estate through insurance is a very unfortunate situation. There have been other plane accidents caused for the very same reason. The ease with which one may purchase a large amount of insurance for a few cents just prior to the flight time will continue to act as an inducement for the unstable person to think in terms of money, either by destroying themselves in an accident or being the cause of an accident to collect as a beneficiary. This practice must be stopped. J.W. Buttersby.
Martha and Chris.
Now, the machines that I saw were always in places where they were very visible to the nervous flyers. They were by the check-in counter or the boarding gate.
Passenger Norman
Getting the boys packed, putting a hold on the paper, getting the dog over to Don's parents' house. I forgot what it was like to be on vacation. Oh, but I'm not complaining. Don finally got some time off, and I was just thrilled at the opportunity to go back to Philadelphia and visit my mom. I think Richard and Douglas are going to be good little travelers. It's their first time seeing Grandma.
Monday, May 12th. Up on the hill, in the blackened wreckage, the workers put aside their shovels and stood silent. Down below, in a sun-drenched meadow, near the shelter of a giant oak tree, 650 grief-stricken relatives and friends prayed for their loved ones. Many of the mourners stared steadily at the seared spot where their loved ones died. Some only glanced at the hill, choosing to fix their gaze on the ancient oak at the base of the hill. A fresh breeze cooled the mourners as they sat in folding chairs in the grass. In a moving display of religious unity, representatives of the Jewish, Catholic, and Protestant clergy conducted a simple, interdenominational service in a cow pasture beside Tassajara Road.
The 37-minute ceremony, held under blue skies, was marred only by the grinding of television cameras and the hushed tones of announcers attempting to create word pictures of the tragic events for television viewers. With the final amen, the press corps silently put away their cameras, tape recorders, and other paraphernalia and left the scene. Many of the families and friends slowly climbed into large black limousines provided by the airlines and began their long ride home.
Passenger Alan Michael Solberg.
I'm the assistant manager at the Save More service station on 13th in San Pablo. I got into a fight with my girlfriend the other night, and I came into work a bit down. Lewis felt sorry for me and gave me Wednesday night off. I decided to hop a flight to Reno. Maybe it'll show her I can have some fun on my own.
Kathy Johnson Jansen.
I was only a kid, but Roger Brander just seemed larger than life. He must have been about 6'7". And when he walked into our kitchen, he'd always hit the wagon wheel chandelier that we had. His hands were like, I don't know, like canned hams. You know, we'd always hear about him too being in a little play somewhere at the Reno Little Theater. And he was the only person on that flight who was actually from Nevada. He was the general manager of KBUB radio station in Sparks, Nevada. KBUB was owned by my father, Edward Jansen. Roger and my father were very close. He used to call Roger the heir apparent. My father was 58 years old at the time and suffering, he was very ill from a heart condition. He was supposed to be on the plane that day, but he was so ill that he asked Roger to go in his place. And I was 10 and a half years old, and that funeral was the only time that I ever saw my father cry. 18 months later, my father died of a cerebral hemorrhage. He's an unknown victim of Flight 773, and I'm an unknown survivor.
On July 31st, 1961, a man later described as an Arkansas construction worker forced his way aboard another Pacific Airlines plane while it was preparing to take off from the Chico, California airport. He demanded that pilot Oscar Cleo fly him home to Arkansas to see his wife. Cleo refused and was shot in the face. The gunman was eventually subdued, and Cleo miraculously recovered, although he was blinded by the event.
A sea of black ink was closing over my eye. That's the way it felt. I was lucky to survive, though I could never be a pilot again. I went into the security business. I believe locking and bulletproofing cockpit doors should be mandatory, and pilots should learn judo. It teaches the person that it's quicker to act than react, thus making it easier to subdue an unruly passenger.
Early in 1964, a federal law was passed mandating that cockpit doors be locked during all commercial flights. Unfortunately, the law did not go into effect until August of that year. After the crash of Flight 773, many airlines started to lock cockpits voluntarily.
Martha Andrus. After the crash, I was approached by Oscar Cleo. He asked me to start writing letters to companies and congressmen all over the country to learn what their policies were and to advocate for the need for improving cockpit and airport security. Oscar arranged for me to meet with congressmen. He had me speaking at the National Airline Pilots Association Safety Forum at the Mayflower Hotel in Washington, D.C. Oh, I knew I was being trotted out as the poor widow, but I didn't care. If it would make a difference, I was willing to do it. For years, I advocated for Congress to spend more money on security. At first, we focused on getting rid of airport slot machine style insurance, and then we moved to making cockpit doors more secure. Despite what had happened in 1964, there was very little appetite for improving security. Well, after 9/11, I got angry and active again. What a horrible, horrible loss of life because no one was willing to pay the price for security. Had more attention been paid to security, well, things might have been very different that day.
Anita Andrus.
I got to know Sandy Dahl. She's the wife of Captain Jason Dahl of United Flight 93 that went down in Pennsylvania on 9/11. We got to talking and I found out that her husband is buried in Oak Hill Cemetery in San Jose. And I said, what a coincidence, my father is buried in Oak Hill Cemetery in San Jose. So next time I went to visit, I looked for Jason's grave. And you know, it was only 12 feet away from my father's. 2 pilots murdered flying commercial airlines 40 years apart, and they're buried basically next to each other.
How is it that you can live in Danville for decades and not know about the crash of Flight 773?
The people that know about it don't want to bring it up, and the people that don't know about it don't know there is anything to bring up.
The history of the Village Theater, as recently as 2013, states the following. In 1964, a plane crashed in the Tassajara Valley, and as the chapel of the San Ramon Valley, next door to the Village Theater, was unable to accommodate the number of bodies involved, a wing of the Village Theater was used as an autopsy room. This wing of the theater was later torn down.
In researching the history of the building, there is no evidence that such a wing ever existed. In fact, news articles and photographs indicate that the autopsies took place on the second floor of what is the current building.
How did this happen?
Chuck Ferreira.
Danville has different populations. There were the old-timers who were raised not to talk about anything like World War II veterans. And then there were the younger people like me who were anxious to get out of Danville and live our own lives. And then you have the majority of people who came after 1964 and weren't around when it happened. People either don't know about it, or if they did, it was a bad memory. It's easier to forget.
David Whalen.
You know, a while ago I Googled the crash and nothing came up. Now when I Google it, all kinds of stuff comes up. I guess it's because of the anniversary, I don't know.
Julie Clark.
I'm shocked people in Danville don't know about the crash. Maybe because I'm in the airline business, I've always been surrounded by people that knew my father or Ray Andrus or the history of the crash. Well, the younger generation probably doesn't know. They hadn't been born yet.
Gordon Rasmussen.
It's not something to brag about. Murdering all those fine people, no heroes here.
Steve Harms, pastor, Peace Lutheran.
People don't know what to do with a thing they can't explain. It was a crime. People died for no reason, no meaning. Community gets paralyzed. To verbalize it brings it into the present. If Danville could pass an ordinance, no death in Danville, they would. Because the people on the plane weren't from Danville. It was much easier to push away.
Julie Clark.
Like my father, I loved the sky. I became a flight attendant and then one of the first female commercial pilots. On the last day I retired from commercial flying after my final safe landing, I let out a deep sigh and said to myself, thank God no one got hurt on my watch. I think all pilots feel that way.
A note from Martha Andrus.
With a great deal of love and support from family and friends, and the continued close friendships with our airline friends, I raised the 4 children alone. I never remarried, and we are all okay. Ray's parents are gone now, but his only sibling, his sister Marilyn, she lives with her husband in the Placerville area of California, and we are still close. I live in Idaho now, near my oldest daughter and her family. And Allison is in the Seattle area, and my middle daughter and her family live in Michigan. Now that daughter, Audrey, is a 38-year flight attendant, and now, after several mergers, is with Delta. Her husband flew as well all those years, also starting out with Air West. My son, he's a captain with Alaska Airlines and lives in Southern California as he flies out of LAX. And my oldest grandson is in the Air Force Reserve, flying the C-17, as well as with a small airline in Michigan. So you see, in spite of our tragedy, we are still very much a flying family. You know, your play might be too emotional to attend, so I'm not planning to be there. But my oldest daughter is going to attend. Ray's sister told me yesterday that if we can all view this play as a tribute to those who lost their lives on May 7, 1964, it would be very touching for all. Good luck with the play, Eric. And if you have other questions, contact us. Thanks for asking about Ray. I miss him. I miss him every day. He was a good, loving son, brother, husband, and father. Those who knew him held him in high regard, and they still do. Most sincerely, Martha Andrus.
Polly Johnson. There's a friend
Mike,
who is closer than a brother. He is with me each moment, each day. Earthly friends often grieve one another. but there's one I can trust and obey.
Mike Salberg.
Thomas A.
Clifford Hall.
Mrs. Earl Thomas.
Norma Hewitt.
William Beakley.
Robert and Mona Galt. Benita Graham.
And her friend, Charnette Lee.
Bernard Block.
Margie Schaefer.
Cleveland A. Clifford Wood.
George and Betty Lacow.
And their friends, Paul and Georgette Marty.
Paul Bell.
Ray Andrus.
E. Lee Williams.
Jörg P. Kathbrunner.
John Dragweed.
Helen Ulrich.
The Kendricks family.
Christopher Galanis.
Thomas and Martha Margrave.
Lon Eakes.
Paul Mello.
Violet Melvin.
Ernest Clark.
Eleanor Parker.
Judith Stopp and her mother-in-law, Clara Stopp.
Roger Brander.
Lillian Teramahi.
Jay Thompson.
George Baldwin and Roger Varney, FAA flight observers. They all had places to go. All were loved by someone. All were like you and me.
On the morning of May 7th, 1964, plane carrying 44 souls disappeared on the slopes off of Tassajara Road. There was nothing recognizable left. It was as if the people on that plane had vanished from this earth. It was as if the people were gone forever. The media ran pictures of the passengers who had perished. The public was fascinated by the sad tales of the suffering families left behind, but soon the story faded from the public's memory. I've often pondered the value of talking about this tragedy. Is there anything to be learned? I still don't have the answer. But maybe, as a community, if we could acknowledge this event once in a while, acknowledge that the people on board Pacific Airlines Flight 773 were real and that for some, the pain of that day has never gone away, it would be our way of saying to the survivors, you are not alone. We remember you.
I'd just love to have part of this process for me was to want to know what other people were feeling and thinking, and so I just would love to hear any thoughts or anything that anyone would be willing to share. I know there are people here who have been longtime Danville people. I don't know what your relationship with the story has been. I know there are people here who actually were very, very directly affected by the events 50 years ago today. But I just wondered if there was anyone who wanted to talk to us about or share anything. Yes?
I worked for the FBI at the time of the crash. And I worked in the photographic department in this jail. So we had many pictures there. And they kind of did a documentary on it. And Andrea's father was an FBI agent, and of course, they didn't allow him to work on this project. But the agent said that because they had the tips, that they said that it was the worst smell that they would never forget. And they were just so devastated by it, as we all were. You did a great job with your play.
Anyone else? Yes, in the back.
My name is Robert Blue. I happen to work in emergency management. So, unfortunately, I'm one of the people that came here after 1964. So I was born a couple of weeks before that, like 10 years. Anyway, I'm going to be recommending this play to the emergency management community because one of the things you miss in emergency management back in the EOC is the emotional impact. We're so distant from it, or if you're a first responder, you're trained not to feel anything. And this is something we're starting to recognize we're missing. We lost that human compassion. So I will be recommending, so hopefully you'll be doing this again.
Dan, could you pop the house light up so we could, yes.
I just had two comments. As one of the main goes for the walks in the Danville area, you know, this is going to become a part of it so that more people remember their loved ones. And secondly, that Danville was referred to as having 5,000 people at the time. And of course, when Captain Sullenberger came and has been working on airline safety, there were 5,000 people there out of the 43,000 for that event. And still, we have a lot of steps to go. So this is a very important play.
Okay, well, you know what? Yes.
I just want to thank you for doing this. That it's just, you brought it such a life. And you're right, that's just, no one has said anything for 50 years, pretty much. But, you know, the Twin Towers go down and they talk about it all the time. And yes, I did get to know Sandy Dahl. We were on to talk about a lot of things. And they bring that to work on the fly a lot of years, but no one's ever done this. And I just want you to know how much I appreciate it. You did such a fabulous job on this. Thank you so much.
I just wanted to speak about Julie. Julie's an old friend of mine, and I met her in the 1960s, and she was the flight attendant with me at Tassajara Helicopter Airlines. And she was a great gal then, and she went on to be an instructor in the Navy, and then started on smaller airplanes and just worked all the way up to being a captain. And she was a good person to know, and she's still active. She's an air show performer. Probably why she's not here tonight, because she's not on the circuit. And I'm sure she's feeling the fact of Eddie and Greenie, and Eddie was still at Travis. They were good friends, I'm sure, and they performed a lot of times in the same shows. So I really, I'm in her book. She wrote about her life, and it sounds to be very, very factual. Even though what I am, which is most recent stuff, but great job.
My name is Jerry Bull, and I'm a 747 Captain 39 Parcel Service. And I actually found this play when I was looking to see what was coming up on the festival for Eugene O'Neill. So, to be honest, I had not, of all the aviation, as long as I've been involved, I had not heard it, so I Googled it. And I have to tell you, I have to do like this lady has said here. I have to thank you for doing this play. Because I just came back this morning from Taipei. So I did hustle here, so I didn't have to But what I tell you is it was well worth the experience and time and the effort that you put into to produce the type of play that you're producing here. And so my compliments go to you. And to talk about this event, I flew for 2 weeks telling guys I was going to this play about this crash. And now I'm 62, the guys I'm flying with the younger never even knew what I was talking about. So it's been enlightenment to me, and I was able to share with them. Hopefully, they'll go home and look at this crash up too, and see what happens.
Yes.
I
want to thank you for bringing to light all the passengers, not just the crew members. Just brought them all together, and there were 43 souls lost, not a flight crew. I commend you for that.
I tried to get, I ran out of time, I tried to get as many personal stories as I could. I will share with you that this was a very live production in the sense that I actually met a daughter of a passenger just this afternoon. She was outside because she was actually going out to the crash site. She didn't want to come tonight, but she was going out to the crash site to put some flowers. And I asked her, could I talk to her for a minute? And so she told me a few things about her mom who was on the plane. And I quickly wrote it out, and as the actors got here tonight, I said, here, it's a new page. So they were real good sports. They just rolled with it, and it kept changing all the time. So, yeah. But thank you. Anything else?
I forgot to ask, do you do a video or anything of this?
Yeah, actually right now, yeah.
Will you be-
I guess if it turns out all right, I guess, or for special requests, absolutely, send it or help you, yeah. It's from the back of the house. It's always not very good from the back of the house, but it's absolutely yours if you want.
I think one of the most beautiful parts of this is the fact that nobody wanted to make any of these safety improvements until after 9/11. And for the people who browse about inspections now, this might be a cautionary tale.
That's amazing. As I was talking to people, I'm also a teacher, and I was taking 7th graders to Santa Cruz this morning. I was talking to the teachers like that. Oh, sorry. I was telling some of the other teachers, did you know you could get insurance in a vending machine? And they looked at me like I was the dumbest person alive. And it's just amazing to me, and I didn't know that until I got to play. It just seems so
outrageous.
Yeah, yeah. The same age had no idea.
Yes.
Small point, except that those that work for days, weeks, not given any credit in what you're doing here. And the Danville doctors, Don McKean, he's a good personal friend. And I saw him nearly every day at church. And he'd go through it with me, what was happening and how awful it was to try to match a finger to some other part of the body and so on. But they didn't give up. And these three doctors we have in town, and others came out of Walnut Creek and other places. But think about them, and they'd be able to shine their crosses just a little bit.
I would have loved to have heard that. One analogy I heard on the NPR at some point was that there was an author being interviewed, and they made the comment, and I can relate to it now. They made the comment that when you write a book, you then meet all the people you should have met before you wrote the book. And that's absolutely the case. There's so many angles and things about the story that I still didn't get a chance to get to just because I didn't make the connections with people with that. But fortunately, a special thanks to the Andrus clan. They came in full force the last couple of weeks and really, I was getting emails. And I just would say that I really admire Martha Andrus. I spent about an hour and a half on the phone with her. She called me. I'd been emailing, and then I guess, obviously my phone number's right there. She called me up and said, there's a few other things you might want to know. And I was like, okay, let me get a pad of paper. And it was wonderful. It was really wonderful.
But thank you for sharing that.
Yes.
About the doctors. It is
very active.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Doing the job.
Thank you.
Cool.
Anyone else? Okay, well, I guess I'd just say two things. There are a couple sheets of paper where if you're interested in stay in contact with us about this project. We'd let you know if there's another version of it or it develops in some form. Please let us know. This is for just write your email or whatever, and we will inform you if anything is going on related to this this story. And another thing is, please join us for punching cookies. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for coming.